and welcome. This is the Downtown Reading Clinic volunteer training video. I am the volunteer coordinator, Heather Morse, and this is Lee Koski and Stephanie Starr, and we're all three head coaches, and we are so incredibly thankful for your service to Downtown Reading Clinic. We're hoping that this will give you all the information that you need. The volunteers are trying to use the app called GroupMe to organize ourselves. So if you could make sure that you're a part of that app, and if you need any assistance in getting plugged into GroupMe, just let me know. Heather Morse, and you probably have my email, but if you don't, it's heatherryanmorse@yahoo.com. And if you need a sub for any reason, GroupMe will be the place to go. I'm also going to make a sub list so that you can have that available as well. We're so thankful that you're here joining us.
I'm Lee, and I'm going to tell you about the first day. If a student has not come at all, we will start you out with your student, and you will begin by doing an All About Me sheet. Just helps make that personal connection between you and the child. At some point in that first session, one of us will come and take the child and give them an assessment so that when actual coaching begins, you will know exactly where to go. So that will be happening. Also, there is a box of books that we will show you where that is in the lower warehouse at Redeemer, so that if you are still in that first hour and we've just finished assessing, you can do a read aloud with the student. So that will be one of your options for the very first day. If your student has already been there and has already been assessed, there is a folder for each student. It will have their name on it. It will be on the bookshelf with all the rest of our materials. So the very first day after the child has had the assessment done, this little tag will be on there telling you exactly where that student needs to start for their coaching session. Okay, I will tell you more about that in just a minute. You'll also get what we call the boxes, and each box has a number of materials. They're just little plastic boxes that are full of all kinds of little goodies. There are pencils and crayons and colored pencils. There are games to play that we'll explain in just a minute. There's a pencil sharpener, highlighters. There's a notebook where the students will write their words. There will be a dry erase board with an eraser. There will be sight word sentences and examples of the use of the words. There are tissues. There's going to be hand sanitizer. There are index cards that will tell you about how to use. The pre-test papers will also be in there. And I think that's about game pieces and cards for use for the activities that Stephanie and I are going to explain to you in just a minute. If at any time you run out of any of those materials or you have a question about what to do with your student, please flag one of the three of the head coaches down so that we can assist you with that. Okay, so along with this folder, and for the first time, you will take this little sticker here. It tells you by number which one of the Fry words, I'll explain that in a minute a little bit more, you will be working on and how to do that. It will tell you what notebook level you will be reaching for to work on the decoding piece, and the page number and the sound that you're actually working on. Inside of the folder, after your session with your student, you will give us the notebook number that you worked on, the sound that you taught, and what 1 minute drill level you worked on. All of those things. The Fry list by itself will be in the folder, and you will use it, and I'll explain that to you in a minute, in just a little bit more detail. if you have any questions about this, you can ask any one of us. There's also on the right side the opportunity to put your name in any comments. And these comments shouldn't be, Freddie was great today. But they should be, Freddie was really hungry and couldn't concentrate today. Or Freddie had a difficult time focusing today, so we did not cover the Fry words on this date. Or what significant things that you think might help in case a sub stepped in for you at that time. So that just gives us a little bit of an indication. If everything's going great, don't even bother to fill this out. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this over to Stephanie and let her talk to you about I also need to tell you about this. These are the coaching instructions. There is a section about decoding on this first page. It actually tells you how to get started. Go get your box, go get the child's folder, those kinds of things. And then it goes explaining the activities that Heather is going to tell you how to do. And on the other side, or the second page, it will tell you exactly what you need to do for the Fry words. Now we're going to tell you what's on this page, but it will be there for your reference at any point. And if anytime you have any questions about what you're supposed to do, let us know. Also, this could be emailed to you if you want to, if you've got questions and you want this attached to your email so that you could have it at home to look at. I know for me that's very helpful. Somebody's told me what I need to do, but now I have questions. So this is what you're going to refer to. And so it can also be attached if you need that, if you don't have a copy and you're just signing up, just let Heather know and she can attach that to an email. Okay, Stephanie?
Hey, I'm Stephanie. I'd love to tell you about when we were dreaming at this reading clinic, why we kind of decided what we needed to work on. And so we had kind of decided, hey, let's work on 3 different skills. The first one I shortened to PA, and that just means phonological awareness, and that's a really big umbrella term, and it just means hearing sounds, manipulating them, and I always tell people it's anything you can do in the dark, and so you could close your eyes and say it, you don't need to have letters for. And then we said, hey, it's important for them to be able to do something that's decodable, and all decodable means it's a really fancy word for sounding something out. So just like a kid might say k, at, and say cat, that would be decoding. And then the third piece we wanted to work on was sight words, because we know that there's a lot of words that we find in the English language that if we sounded them out, they don't always make sense. For example, was. If we sounded that out, we might say as, was. And so we said, hey, if we can put all 3 of these parts together, we think we can really improve these student skills. And so what I'm going to be going over is the coaching instructions. And so I'm going to start here under the decodable instructions here. And remember, decoding just means sounding out. So the first part is grabbing your 1-minute activities. And so if you have this available, you'll have, it'll look like this. And so I'm just going to read it aloud to you, but you would not allow the student to see this. Again, remember, it's something that they could do in the dark if they have their eyes closed, and so you're going to read it to them. So we'll start here at the top where there's the directions, and everybody will start at D1. It's the first level. I don't know why it starts at D. That's just what they decided. And we'll say birthday. Now say birthday, but don't say birth. And the student would say day. And what you're going to want to do is go through, and they are going to want to get 5 correct. Just 5 of these little exercises. Not 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would take too long. You're going to want to do this in just 1 minute. Now, if they're doing really well and they're able to say 5 of these correctly, you're just going to turn the page and go to the next level. In this one, it would be D2, and the directions would be at the top. Again, you're watching the clock, and you're thinking, hey, I only have about a minute or 2 to do this. And so you might stop. And then when you do, you would write it in the notebook that Lee had here where you stopped at. And you would say, hey, I got done with this 1-minute level drill, and you would write D1 or D2 or even a little note to yourself if you need to say something more about
Do you
that.
mind acting out that activity?
I don't.
Sure. Say candy.
Candy.
Now say candy, but don't say can.
D.
Say enter.
Enter.
Now say enter, but don't say in.
Ter.
Say member.
Member.
Now say member, but don't say mem.
Burr.
Now can you get this one wrong? Pretend like you're a student that gets
Okay.
it wrong. I'll show you how. Say humble.
Humble.
Good. Now say humble, but don't say hum.
But humble.
Close, yeah. So if I said humble and don't say hum, the answer is bull. So you can just tell them the answer. If they're really struggling with this, come chat with me or Heather or Lee, and I can give you some other ideas of things that you can do to improve that skill. Now, we don't expect you to move a level each time you meet. Depending on your student, you might only stay in D1 for a while. And that's why when you look at your pages, you'll see that there's pages and pages of different exercises to do with them. So don't feel discouraged if you're just staying in that one part with them, because you are helping them build these skills. Next, after you're done with your 1-minute activities, we're going to talk about where you would review. And so what we would say is, if this was your 3rd lesson with a student, so you had already taught them a skill, what you're gonna do is you're gonna open to the skill you had taught last week. So let's pretend like it was O, and you're gonna open it up, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna point to the letter and you're gonna ask the student to tell you the letter and the keyword and the sound. And so you would say, oh, Javion, do you remember what this says? And they might tell you, oh, octopus, ah. If they're able to do that, awesome. You might need to remind them. And then what you're gonna do, just to check in to see, hey, do they really remember this? Because it's been 7 days since you saw them, is you're gonna just ask them to read this. And so as we're reviewing, we're just seeing, do they remember what we taught last week? Hopefully they would be able to say dot, rob, hop. If they do, awesome. Then you're gonna move on to the next skill taught. If they're not remembering it, you might take this moment to do a little bit more reteaching, and then you might see if they're able to catch on down at the bottom. And if they're still not able, I would reteach this lesson. And Lee had given a good example when we were talking earlier about saying like, oh, we're just gonna do some review games. It's just a review day, making it really just fun for them, and so that they're not feeling any shame or anything about doing this. So now let's talk about after the review. Let's say they did really well on this. Now you're gonna move into teaching your new skills. So that's here on your coaching instructions. It said introducing a new letter or sound. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna get your decodable notebook out, and you'll go and you'll open to your pages. And let's say for today, we're teaching O, because that's what I have out. And so the first page you're gonna open to is the one with the picture. And so what you're gonna tell them is you're gonna say, hey Javion, this is our new letter. We're learning O, octopus, ah. And what you're gonna want them to do is to repeat it after you. And then you're gonna ask them, you're gonna turn the page back to the front because it almost looks like this. Sorry, that's tricky. And you're gonna take your 2 fingers and you're gonna place them like this, and you're gonna show them how you write it. And you're gonna say, oh, octopus, ah. Now in your coach's box, there'll be something that we call an overlay. It's just something bumpy you can put over there just to make it a little bit more textile. We do want to use 2 fingers for this. There's some fancy research that shows doing that connects it to the brain. So with 2 fingers, you would say, oh, octopus, ah, and then you would have the student do it twice. I also wrote down here what to say in case you weren't sure. One thing I forgot to mention that I meant to before is that if you see anything in lines like this, that just means sounds. So you're not gonna say the letter name. So for example, if you saw this, you would say B. If you saw this, you would say P. And you would say D. And you would say These are tricky ones, which is why I thought to do it. Do you think we could take a minute where I'll say it and then you, as a participant in the video, you can repeat it after me? And sometimes I think of keywords to help me remember. So for this one, I might say ball, and I might say B. Now you say it. P. You say it. D. You say it. And I always have to think of this one. It's tricky for me. Rat. R. We don't want to add the sound on it, even though a lot of us are Southern and I would get in trouble for it, because when they get into spelling, sometimes they'll add that U as they're spelling. And so these are some ones that we will practice. So after they're done tracing, you'll put this to the side and you'll get out their words to read page. And so what you're going to want to do is look at this first row and you'll ask them to highlight it. So you'll say, hey Javion, can you take your highlighter and can you highlight just that row and say ah, ah, ah. Then you'll ask them to go back, and depending where they're at, a lot of them might need to sound out each sound, and so you might ask them to put their finger underneath and say d, ot, dot. They'll go through this whole row. Then they'll go and they'll highlight the next row. Ah, 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 and read. Then you'll take them down to the sentences to read, and you'll ask them to do the same thing, to highlight the O and say ah, 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 and then you can help them read a sentence. If they are struggling with reading some of these, let's talk about some things we can do. So if, I always like to tell people a lot of B's and D's can be hard for younger students and also for struggling readers. And so one thing that you can do is if you can take your finger, and I'm going to turn around and show you, but this is my B. So if I was showing Lee, we'd be talking and I would say, this is B. I say balloons go up. What sound does the balloons make? And Lee might tell me, oh, B. So then we might look at this one and we might compare it and say, does that B look the same as that letter? And Lee might say, no. And so I might say, if that's not a B, what sound is it? And she might tell me, oh, it's a D sound. And so that's one way of helping students. Another one is they might not say the ah sound there. Maybe they're making a different vowel sound. And so you might say to them, if they said dat for that one, you might say, oh, I heard you say ah, but that looks like an O. Can we think about what sound the O makes? And maybe you could direct them to the picture again if they're struggling. Or if you can't remember any of that, just simply tell them it says ah and help them out. That's your role here, is to be able to correct them in a kind way. So after you're done reading this, this will go home with them. If they highlight it, they get to keep it. Next in the coaching instructions, you'll see that it talks about playing a game. There are 3 different games we have. One is, or 4, there's Go Fish and matching, or you might be asked to play a rolling dice game, and then there's a board game. But the directions are under each game, and if you have questions about them, feel free to ask Heather, Lee, or I. And then the next part of our decodable instructions is the reading passage. And so depending on where you're at in a level, it can look different. For the letter O, it might look like this because the student's not ready to have lots and lots of words or paragraphs in it. However, if you're in level 2, it's gonna look a little bit different. And so if I was doing this with a student, you could talk about O, octopus, ah. Remember, those lines are meaning the sound. And maybe after I talked about all this and we had time, I might let them color it and we might talk about the ah sound a little bit more. And then you're gonna come down here to this passage. And again, you're gonna give them a highlighter or a crayon, whatever makes them happy. And you're gonna ask them to go through and underline the ahs. So ah, ah, and they might underline all of them depending on where you felt they were at. Maybe you're just ready for them to do a sentence. And then they're gonna come underneath, and again, they might say b-ob, bob. This word they might not have gotten to on their fry list that Lee's gonna explain in a little bit, and so you might need to tell them that says was. So just keep that in mind if there's a word that you can't sound out and that they might not have gotten there. So be mindful of that. And you would read this. Once the child's done reading the passage and Lee, Heather, or I haven't said, hey, it's been about 25 minutes, you need to switch over to the fry or rise to read section, then you can go back and you could take turns reading it. So maybe if Lee and I were reading it, I might say, Lee, why don't you read that first sentence?
Bob was at the job.
Good job, Lee. And then I might read, Bob got a big mop. And then I might let Lee read the next sentence.
Mop the gob. A gob, Bob.
Mop the mat, Bob. And so you can just take turns, and that's going to work on their fluency and to be able to read the passage with a little bit more ease. So once you have done that, then you can kind of look at your time and see where you're at. But ideally, you would be done with your 25 minutes and moving into our sight read, arise to read, fry word part.
Okay. And on the part that Stephanie talked about right here, this is your decoding word recording. So just to remind you, since she's shown it to you, you're going to write the level number, the sound taught. In this case, that would be a short O. So you write O, and the 1 minute drill level right there, so that next week you know exactly where you are. If you're like me, you won't remember. So that's what this is for. And it will be our job. You can help us out here by, if you're on about the last one, let us know that we need to refill this page for you. Same thing with the comments. That would really help us out. So on your coaching instructions right now, we're going to the second part, which is the fry word list. The words on this list are about 70% of what we actually read. And some of these words have little or no meaning in isolation. Some of them have difficult sounds. The W words, the TH words are difficult words for children. They confuse them. So, practice is one thing you want to do. Here's the fry word list. It's ancient. It's been used. There are a lot of lists out there, but they're all very basically the same. Same things I was learning when I was in first grade. They're learning now in first grade because these just form a basis of what they have to automatically learn. We are working for a big word called automaticity. So if they know this word within 3 seconds, that's an automatic response for them. They're doing with automaticity. If they're trying to sound it out or taking 5 to 10 seconds to tell you the word, they don't know it well enough. So each one of the students in their folder will have a fry list, and it will be marked from the assessment that we've done to let you know. It's going to look a little bit more like this. That's a blank one. They will have a fry list that has been highlighted. The highlighted words are the words that they have gotten. The circled words are the words that we've identified as they do not know well. Especially on this first assessment, there may be some words on there that the next time you pick up this fry list, it's going to sound like, oh, they knew that word. Well, if it's questionable, we want to review it and make sure that it is firmly entrenched in their mind. So this one shows not just the first 5 words. It shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words that were identified. Those would be the words that you're working on. And on your very first assessment, because you won't need it thereafter, we have put the number. If you'll notice, there's a number by each word. We've written the number on this little piece of paper. So the first time you will know exactly which words, but you'll also be able to identify them by the fact that they are circled. So if this got lost, you're still good with the fry words. So what will happen is you will take these fry words and follow what is here on your directions. So, thank you. The students' first coaching, you're going to identify those 5 words, all right? And you're going to ask, so say this is the first session. You're going to point to these words and ask them to tell you these 5 words that have been identified. If they can tell you those words, you may go ahead and highlight them. When you're doing that, they have to know that word within 3 seconds. So if they're going and they're struggling, and finally they get that word out, do not count it as no. Again, it's just like our first assessment. So this particular student knew that word, so it's been highlighted. You do not need to do that word again. This one has been highlighted. But these 2 words, 3 words, were not. So they remain words that you will work on. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what the coach did They got these 2 words, they highlighted it. They continue down the list until they reach 5 words missed. After this first time, they went through and worked on those 5 words. They know 2 of the 5. They have dated it and underlined where they worked. So the next time they identified 2 more, and they worked on those 5. They underlined it and identified the date. You will do that with each session. So once you've identified your 5 words, you'll go to this section under your list. It says mastering your 5 words. So you're going to repeat those 5 words that you are using over and over. You start by reading the circled word, telling the student the word, having the student repeat the word. Then they write the word. There are a number of ways that you can write the word using the materials in this box. There is paper, there's the mat that, what do you call it, the overlay?
Yeah.
The overlay, you can trace the word with the overlay. You can write it on a dry erase board. There are crayons, there are markers, there are colored pencils. So you're giving the student the opportunity to choose a variety of ways, whatever's most fun. We want to make this a fun learning experience for the students. So after they've written their 5 words, they're going to use the words in a sentence. If they can't figure out how to use this word in a sentence, you may give them an example. That also is in your box. If you can't think of an example of ways to use the word. And then you're going to play a game. Each one of the games is laminated. We tried to give it a nice, good, stiff laminate. There are dry erase markers. And you write these words on your game board. The instructions here tell you to use words that you've taught in the past. I tended not to do that. I just wrote the same 5 words over and over again. It gave them that much more practice. So whatever your choice is to help them to remember is all right. So those are the things that you're going to do. And then you're reaching your closing with your student. One of our jobs is going to be to let you know when probably you ought to be wrapping up your first decoding session and to move then into your fry words. Then we'll also try to give you a 5-minute warning so that you know you're wrapping up your activity. One of the things that you're going to be doing while you're playing these games and the children are writing their words, you're repeating those 5 words over and over again, pointing to the words so that they are making that visual connection with what they are saying out loud and hearing in their ears. So you're taking an index card, which is in your box, and writing the 5 words. You want to encourage them, just like they're taking home these pages on the sound that they worked on. You are going to give them those 5 words and encourage them to practice them at home with hopefully an adult or an older person in their home, someone who can make sure that they're saying those 5 words correctly. And that's what we want. The more repetition they get, the better they remember their sight words. So you're closing, you're repeating those words again, reading those 5 words, and you're going to reward your student with a sticker. 1 sticker. They'll ask for more. You just politely, well, this is what we're doing, and this is what, we're not going to bring them gifts. We're not going to promise them trips to the zoo. We're encouraging them with words always throughout this whole process. We're letting them know that their effort is appreciated, it's working, that they're doing well. But that sticker's just their one little thing of you're walking away with this one thing. So, and after that, we are going to be escorting students to you and bringing them to their cars. That's not something we want us in this COVID era to be doing as little roaming about as possible. So we'll be taking your students to the cars, and before you leave, we want you to mark the student's folder on the inside, right here, once again, and comments if you need it. We want you to put that fry list back in this folder. Then we want you to take the box and the notebooks and the folders and put them on the bookshelf that we have in the lower warehouse. And also we want you if you are there, whatever your session, if you have one session, please sanitize as much as you can in that box before another student comes. If you have 2 sessions, in between your sessions, do that, and before you leave and put that box back on the shelf, please sanitize as much as you can. Wear your mask, have your student wear their mask, and I think that's it. Did I leave anything out?
Great.
I think we cannot tell you how much we appreciate what you're doing, and we cannot begin to convey to you what it means to these children, these precious children, that you are giving your time and helping them do something, having fun with them. You're playing games in both activities, laugh with them, enjoy them. They are delightful. And it means so much. And if you happen to be absent one time and somebody else is there in your spot, they're going to miss you. You absolutely cannot imagine the magic, the wonder of these relationships with these students. So thank you so much for volunteering and for what you're giving to them. Again, if you have any questions, you can contact any of the 3 of us. You can raise your hand at any point and say, I don't know what to do here. Or if you're struggling with any discipline, we're going to be roaming around, looking over shoulders, not to peep at what you're doing, but to see what these children are doing and just to make sure that things are flowing smoothly for you. So thank you again. We're very, very grateful.